Okay, good morning. We'll just get started here. How's everybody? Everybody fine? No long running intro today. Just want to get right to Isuckville.
So eager. Take us there,
Yeah, oh,
Phyllis.
please, please. Yeah, let's get in and out. For anyone who's listening who's not here, this is the chapter in this section of the book called something, core competencies or something. After we've talked about what the soul is, now there's things that I think we need to learn how to be able to do in order to really live a soulful life. See, that's a really short summary. So this chapter is called Leaving Isuckville, and I'm just really we talk about this a lot. We probably talked about this for 7 years here, but I'm really interested in some of the thoughts you might have, or um, ways that you might relate, or things that you might want to talk about when we're done. So, Leaving Isuckville. Quote, "My mind is a bad neighborhood that I try not to go into alone." End quote. Anne Lamott. And I love my thoughts. I'm just not tempted to believe them. Byron Katie. If you've lived a life of listening for a deeper voice, if you've come to the end of all your ways of knowing, or if you're just plain tired of your dysfunctional relationship with yourself and you think there must be a better way to live, your soul might be trying to get through to you. Your soul wants to help you live a better life, be all you can be, experience flow and wholeness, joy and self-expression. But here's the deal. Living from your soul is a revolutionary concept. As wonderful as it sounds, if you are a dedicated pilgrim on the path of soulful living, you need to know that walking down this path will mean a fundamental change in your internal management structure, a complete mental overhaul, a personal internal revolution, nothing less. And one of the core competencies you need in order to live from your soul is the ability to leave Isuckville behind. What is Isuckville, you ask? Isuckville is the place at the bottom of your psyche, of our psyche, not yours. At the bottom of our psyche that constitutes the reason we constructed an alternative self in the first place. Isuckville is the bad neighborhood in our minds, although with all due respect to Anne Lamott, the whole neighborhood analogy is a tad inadequate. Some of us, myself included, have thriving metropolises comprised of all kinds of bad neighborhoods in our minds. I affectionately refer to Isuckville as my hometown, the place I constructed in my early years, and the place I find myself returning to on a regular basis. I call it Isuckville because no matter the individual suburbs or housing developments that comprise it, the message is always some version of I suck. So what does it matter if I suck is expressed as I'm inadequate, stupid, fat, unlovable, inherently defective in some mysterious way, incompetent, hypocritical, selfish, too much, too little, or any one of 1,000 specific complaints? It all feels like shame. Shame feels real bad, and so I suck seems to cover it nicely, if a bit crudely. Besides, I'm tired of chasing down every one of the negative messages I have lying around in that city. Calling it Isuckville lumps them all into the same category. From the low-rent district of fat, stupid loser to the more sophisticated lakeside properties of inadequate, unenlightened, or just not good enough, all these neighborhoods are part of the same city, the city of shame, Isuckville. In the fall of 2005, my husband and I accompanied our son on a massive road trip, visiting a few graduate schools he was interested in attending the following year. We rented a car and drove from Denver to Minneapolis, Chicago, and finally Ann Arbor, Michigan, before heading back to central Illinois to spend Thanksgiving with family. The freeway from Ann Arbor to Chicago, from which we would need to turn south to get to Springfield, was jam-packed with semi-trucks, moving grill to mud flaps for 240 miles. We felt intimidated by hundreds of these 18-wheelers on the road with us, all the more so as we approached the toll road taking us around the south side of Chicago. The lanes expanded as we approached the toll booths, but we could see nothing, trapped as we were on all sides by the towering trucks. Even if we knew which lane to be in, we were unable to change lanes in any direction. Our only option was to keep moving and hope we made it through okay. Eventually, we found ourselves swept into the express toll lanes for commercial vehicles only. We sailed through the gates with no way to pay, worried that we were soon to be tracked down and arrested by the highway patrol for our inability to be in the right lane at the right time. When I think of Isuckville, I think of that trip from Ann Arbor to Springfield, trapped in a lane with no escape, forced through the toll gates along with the semis. There was simply nowhere else to go. The road to Isuckville is like that. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones whose inner neighborhoods are as pristine and ordered as a newly crafted SimCity program. Maybe you're someone who has never spent a minute in Isuckville and wouldn't know how to get there if you tried. I hear there might be people like you in the world. But for the rest of us, Isuckville is a familiar destination we regularly find ourselves in without even trying. For many of us, the exit to Isuckville consists of 10 lanes, stuffed grilled to mud flaps, heading through the toll booth whether we want to go there or not. We might be trying for the bright lights of New York City, but somehow we find ourselves taking the exit to Isuckville with all the other poor schmucks. If you'd like to live from your authentic self, guided, supported, and informed by your soul, you're going to need to find your way out of Isuckville. Fortunately, it is possible. More than possible, it's essential. And although there's no Mr. Wizard to reliably yank you out of there every time you get caught in the next exit ramp with all the other 18-wheelers, I do have a few ideas that might help. But first, a few fun facts about Isuckville. Fact number 1, Isuckville sucks. It sucks because it is manufactured by shame. Shame is a powerful and primal human emotion, nearly intolerable to experience directly for any length of time. Shame is deadly, so deadly that some would literally take their own lives, commit atrocities against others, or build elaborate lifestyles in order to avoid feeling it, even for a minute. I'm not only referring to the emotion of shame, I'm talking about the condition of shame, the inner milieu of shame that lies at the bottom of our relationship with ourselves. The condition of shame is the very fabric of Isuckville. Shame in its many expressions infuses the air we breathe and the water we drink there. Shame sets the emotional tone of every minute we spend there. And incidentally, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and vital self-esteem are actually against the law in Isuckville. Fact number 2, Isuckville literally sucks. It sucks the vitality out of us. It severely restricts our sense of what is true in our lives. Isuckville warps our thinking, inhibits our creativity, and severely distorts any true assessment of ourselves. Isuckville sucks the self-esteem out of us before we even begin to consider liking ourselves. Fact number 3. We built Isuckville when we were trying to figure out how to get along in the world. The problem with childhood is that we're busy laying the psychological, ontological, existential foundation of our sense of self with a mind-brain that is grossly inadequate for the task. A child's brain is egocentric by nature. It can only run the whys of life through the grid of self. For example, if something bad happens, it must say something bad about me. If important people are angry or out of control around me, it must mean there's something wrong with me. This closed loop of learning results in a fundamental experience of the self as bewilderingly defective, thus informing the basic infrastructure of Isuckville. The whole let's throw a vulnerable child into a crazy world and make them navigate the intricacies of living with a brain that is completely inadequate for the task is a fundamental design flaw of the human race, making Isuckville an unfortunate fact of psychic living for lots of people. Fact number 4. The fundamental premise of Isuckville is, of course, wrong. False. A complete lie. Yes, people do wrong and bad things. This does not make them hopelessly and intrinsically defective. If you do bad things, you can usually make them right. If you are a bad thing, nothing can help. No one comes into the world as essentially bad. We come to that conclusion because it was the only thing that could have made sense of the world from our childish perspective. Fact number 5. We mistakenly believe that the only way out of Isuckville is to prove that we don't actually suck. This is a hard concept, so I'll say it again. We mistakenly believe the only way out of Isuckville is to prove that we don't actually suck. Children come out of the womb naturally themselves, unself-conscious, unaware of the opinions of others, secure in their natural being. As we grow and learn, however, we discover that sometimes we're not okay. We experience disappointment, anger, frustration, and high standards of others, and we conclude that we must not be okay. Socialization means that we must conform to the standards of our families, schools, and peer groups. This is natural and good, but inadvertently it leads some of us to be constantly on the lookout for our okayness. We develop a habit of checking to see if we're okay on a situation-by-situation basis. We begin to believe that only when we're sure we're okay can we return to the simple freedom of being ourselves. Eventually, we can become hypervigilant, scanning our environment as if we're always asking, am I okay? Am I okay today? How about now? Am I okay now in this group according to these people? How do I know I'm okay? What criteria of okayness am I using today? And how am I doing? How okay am I? Okay compared to whom? What about now? Am I okay now? Will I be okay tomorrow? What if I'm not okay? What if I just think I'm okay, but I'm not really okay? How can I be sure I'm really okay? Left to our own childish devices, without secure attachment and loving reflection, this constant insecurity leads to the day-by-day construction of Isuckville, and we become obsessed with the question of our own okayness. The carefree expression of our own childhood goodness gets replaced with a constant questioning of our worthiness. Worthiness becomes the carrot on a stick. We're always pursuing but never obtaining it. Pretty soon we find ourselves in the city of our own making, Isuckville. It's as if Isuckville has a mayor, otherwise known as the inner critic, who occupies a boxing ring in the center of town, ready to test my worthiness at any time. If I want to leave, I think I must climb into the ring and fight it out with His Honor the Mayor. For some reason, my inner critic is male. Go figure. As I dutifully enter the ring yet again, I fail to recognize a couple of important things. Number 1, pummeling me is the mayor's one and only job. And 2, in this town, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. I, by comparison, am a 98-pound weakling, yet I'm desperate to leave, so I keep climbing into the ring with him, providing evidence in my favor, hoping against hope that maybe this time I can leave town for good. Instead, time after time, whenever I tangle with the mayor of Isuckville, I come away with a total and complete beatdown. I'm chagrined to admit that after decades of trying to leave Isuckville for good, I failed to notice that pummeling me is his only job. He never loses because he is only qualified to do one thing, beat me to a bloody pulp. Nevertheless, I keep entering the ring because I believe I have to earn my way out, prove that I'm worthy to live in the real world, convince the mayor that I don't actually suck. I keep getting into the ring because I believe I have to be worthy of leaving. Further, I believe that the only one with the authority to declare me worthy is the one whose only job is to remind me how impossible it is to leave, how much I deserve to live there permanently, and how unthinkable it is to be free. I fail to leave Isuckville because I keep getting into the ring. Thankfully, somewhere in the miserable years of my midlife crisis, I learned some things about the mind and the brain that I did not know. I learned that beliefs are essentially neural pathways in the brain, built by thinking the same emotionally laden thoughts over and over again. I learned that every time I repeat a similar thought, that neural pathway gets just a little bit thicker. This is how learning works. When we learn a foreign language, memorize lines in a play, or find our way to work every day, we're building roads in the brain. Once a particular road is established, we don't have to think about going down it anymore. We just go there automatically. Learning literally changes the brain. Every time I rehearse a particular belief in my mind, that fat little pathway gets stronger and more efficient. That neural pathway not only gets fatter, it coats itself with myelin so it can get me to the end point of my belief more efficiently each time. In other words, beliefs build superhighways in the brain. The more my thoughts travel down the same highway, the more lanes get added to that particular route. Not only that, the speed limit on that highway goes way up. That means that after 6 decades of going to Isuckville, I can get there faster than ever before. And the more times I go there in my mind, the wider that highway grows, and the quicker I find myself at the center of town, in the ring, fighting for my existence. I began to consider the possibility that I could maybe do something about that. I may not be able to believe all the affirmations I tell myself, but it might be possible to stop reinforcing the superhighway. Or if I found myself in Isuckville by habit, I could excuse myself and just get out of there without having to convince myself of my own worthiness. Dawning on me was the realization that even my efforts to engage in the debate about my self-worth only reinforced the pathway I took to get there. Arguing with the mayor of Isuckville only reinforced the belief that I belong there until the end of days. I began to consider the possibility that by directing my attention away from Isuckville, I could stop myself from reinforcing the highway. That was my one and only hope. Notice I wasn't hoping I could defeat the mayor in a believing contest. I didn't have to believe I was somehow worthy, or that I didn't actually suck, or that I was good enough, smart enough, and by golly, people could like me. Because as long as I remain an imperfect person on the earth, an argument could be made that I actually do suck in some ways. Soon I became intrigued by the idea that the core beliefs of shame are not a reflection of ultimate reality. They're just roads I built in my mind. Simple neurophysics, if you will, instead of truth versus untruth. Finally, I could stop trying to argue the merits of my suckage and concentrate on getting out of this particular highway building project. Isuckville already had too many on-ramps. I didn't have to keep adding more. My ability to leave Isuckville hinged on my willingness to end my addiction to judging, to stop making a judgment about my worthiness one way or the other, to stop having to convince myself that being at peace with myself is a merit-based process, as if I can only be at peace if I'm convinced I've earned it. In other words, I had to be willing to accept the idea that it doesn't matter whether I suck or not. It just doesn't matter. So changing the channel became my go-to practice. If I started obsessing about my worthiness, started feeling that familiar gut kick when I second-guessed something I said or did, I immediately diverted my attention to something else. The same practice worked when I found myself already in Isuckville, already mired in that particular feeling of defectiveness. As soon as I noticed, I changed the channel, and for the next few years I told myself any channel will do. Picking up a novel will do. Putting on Netflix will do. Going for a walk, getting a drink of water, visiting my granddaughter, working a puzzle on my phone will do. The only thing I could control was whether or not I was reinforcing the highway. Feeling the relief of escaping the ring counted as victory, even if I had to do it 20 times a day. Eventually I started to ease up inside. break free, get some distance, stop obsessing. Finally, I became consistently able to leave Isuckville behind. Again, please notice that I did not solve the big question, do I suck or not? I gave up the drive to settle that question once and for all. I began to believe that question is truly irrelevant. A word of clarification. Changing the channel in service to leaving Isuckville is not the same as numbing out or avoiding legitimate pain. I'm aware that there are millions of actual permanent residents of Isuckville who early on resigned themselves to living there and simply found ways to mask the pain. Addiction, preoccupation, avoidance, and all kinds of strategies to push away the pain and the shame are not what I'm talking about here. I'm speaking to those overconscientious ones who, like me, have been trying like mad to face our shame and conquer it through self-awareness and whatever it takes to end the hamster wheel of perfectionism. For us, diverting attention is an act of sobriety. Eventually, sobriety leads to all kinds of possibilities. Another word of clarification. Changing the channel is one strategy among many I employed while trying to feel better. One strategy among many that included acupuncture, creative expression, self-compassion, and meditation. A comprehensive approach is best, one that includes all aspects of the self, but dealing with our compulsive, critical, and often abusive self-talk is essential. Learning good mental hygiene is required for the journey. So why is leaving Isuckville an essential core competency of soulful living? It has to do with the nature of the soul. The soul does not worry about okayness, worthiness, comparisons, or justifications for its existence. There is no deserving, earning, competing, or negotiating. The soul is whole. Her mantra is, I am, full stop. I am is not engaged in the constant drama of its own worthiness. Isuckville is not a function of the soul. It simply is not a thing. To the soul, worthiness is a settled non-issue. The soul lives in its own town, if you will, and is constantly inviting us to live there with it. To do so means we can't be spending all our mental and emotional energy on endless futile discussions of our worth. That task belongs to the ego back when. Now that we're here, that conversation is moot. Really. When we leave Isuckville behind, we free up space to learn and discover other things. We have bandwidth to learn the soul's way. We have the capacity to recognize opportunities that may come our way and to dream our way into high reward living. If we leave Isuckville behind, we become free to establish joy and contentment as the foundation stones of our felt existence. Well-being becomes the new normal, which allows us the capacity to take risks, expand our offering to the world, and experience the benefit of our potential goodness while making the world a better place for ourselves and others, just by being. Leaving Isuckville behind enables us to reattach to our souls without the constant resistance that shame throws at us. Leaving Isuckville gives us unimpeded access to our soul's resources. Leaving Isuckville helps us reconfigure our internal management structure, shifting authority away from the ego and toward the soul with its unconventional values and practices. Leaving Isuckville frees up energy to build new roads in the mind, roads that lead to so many interesting and fulfilling places, places that don't suck. So let's do it, shall we? Let's get off the on-ramp whenever we notice we're on our way to Isuckville. Let's get out of town whenever we find ourselves already there. Let's do it first by changing the channel over and over, 100 times a day if need be. Let's do it by breaking the first law of Isuckville, offering ourselves kindness, compassion, and permission to be whomever we are in any given moment. Let's do it by giving up the right to judge our worth based on the impossible standards of His Honor the Mayor. Let's do it by giving up the right to judge ourselves at all, finding the relief of simple being. Let's do it by remembering the presence of our own souls, yielding to our pure presence, freeing ourselves from the ego's manufactured drama. Let's do it by treating ourselves as well-loved children, supported and nurtured by unearned self-love. It's hard work, I admit it, and not as simple as I have presented it here, but it's worth the effort as well as the time and expense should you find yourself in need of help along the way, as most of us do. In another chapter, I'll offer several practices that will help us lay down some new neural pathways, but for now, please consider the possibility that, unlike Hotel California, you can check out of Isuckville anytime you want. And yes, you can actually leave. Hope that's not too cheesy there at the end. I'm like, really? Okay, let me just make sure we're still going here.
Love the subtle wizard, Captain Kangaroo, or whatever that came from. Help me, Mr. Wizard.
Oh, yeah. It's like, where's Mr. Wizard when you need him?
There's only a small percentage of us that still remember Mr. Wizard.
I know, yeah. Okay, boomer. And you're Mr. Wizard. Yeah.
Jizzle, drazzle.
Yes.
Time for
Time
this
for
one.
this one
To
to
go
go
home.
Zoom, zoom.
Yeah, so I know what went through my head, I probably jumped ahead a chapter or two, I don't know, because there was so much powerful stuff that you said, and the biggest one that I dwelled on, I guess, because I found it the most important in my own life, was to not judge yourself. You know, you are, I am, is what you said, full stop, right? Yeah, that was so important. But the part I immediately got curious about is okay, so what would Phyllis advise in terms of, that's for your internal life, and it's 100% true, but the reality is we also have to deal with the outside life, and the outside life, to be successful socially, is kind of knowing where you sit vis-a-vis other people. Yeah, and so that's just kind of where my head went right away. You know, it's that this is fully true, and yet you still got to figure out how to negotiate that boundary somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of putting your finger on the, always the crux of it is, how do you live a soulful life? Yeah. How does a person who has an actual job or a family or, stuff to do in the world, how do they actually live soulfully when the rest of the world is living by a whole different, set of values? And how does that feel on the inside? And how do you make decisions based on that? And how do you navigate your way through?
Well, even the setup, assuming that the whole rest of the world is not living a soulful life, might be part of the conspiracy, because you know what I'm saying, that maybe other people are actually trying to live a soulful life too, but nobody's willing to crack the secret out loud, publicly, socially, and so that's the conspiracy, is that we're all trying to do this individually, but nobody's admitting it out loud in those social spaces.
I like that. It's really hopeful. That we're kind of stuck in this maze together, and we're not the only ones trying to live from the soul.
Yeah, and that, like, the key to getting out of the maze is we have to, band together.
Yeah. Or somebody has to start saying things out loud.
Exactly. That's that vulnerability.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brene Brown, right? That's the vulnerability bit.
Yeah.
Being willing. Being willing.
That bitch. Oh, sorry.
What? Did I say something wrong?
Brene Brown, we love you.
It's a joke.
Oh, sorry.
That's a joke.
It's an inside joke.
Yeah. But I was just telling Mary the other day, I met somebody, and it's like, I bond so quick with people that are quick to be vulnerable. Because I go, seeker, you know. I'm like, cool. That's awesome because you only do that if you're willing. You're not only trying to help yourself, but you're willing to help others. You're kind of, I don't know. I just that to me is like an instant cool. You know, I like that person.
Yeah.
So you have to be vulnerable, not live in that. But we use conspiracy, yeah.
What does she call the people that get to know the people she can be vulnerable to? She doesn't make, like some people call them the garden friends, like Jesus said, the Garden of Gethsemane friends.
yeah. What's the Brene
But
Brown calls
she
those
has
people?
a different name for her group of people that she feels you can be vulnerable to. She doesn't recommend being vulnerable
To anyone.
to
everybody.
everyone.
Indiscriminate.
There are people who will help you when
Yeah.
you, and there are other
And-
people who would make it worse. if
Yeah.
you're
Right, who
vulnerable.
will
Yeah.
exploit
True.
that to
Yeah.
their benefit. That's why it's a conspiracy. It's like you have to have some way of reading the code
Yeah.
to know, is this a person that I
That
can,
I can do
inch
this with.
open
Yeah.
with
Mhm.
or not?
And yeah, it doesn't feel like it's that hard to figure that out. Like I don't think I know the code, but doesn't it seem like? I mean, I don't feel like I've made that wrong choice too many times.
You don't work at a university.
Well, I think there's certain places in the world are just safer than others to be who you are.
I was just thinking that about my boss has lately been trying to be more human, and she like asks me like, so what are you doing, you know, and I'll tell her what I'm doing, and then Wednesday I had to leave, and she's like, oh, what are you doing tonight? And I'm like, I'm going to a thing at my church. I still
What
feel
kind of
really
a thing?
weird about it
Yeah.
because now
Yeah.
I'm like, what does she think of me now?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked in the job that I had when this one guy started falling on his sword and actually admitting to things that we had been doing wrong with our data processes that were affecting results and so on. And he would just write a memo and say, yeah, here's what we found, and we'd been counting these things wrong. And it was like admitting to an accounting error.
Yeah.
And I had been taught, no, let's flush this out with the next news cycle. You know, let's make a major revision in how we're doing things, and then at that time we'll implement the fix. And
nobody needs to know.
and
about
nobody
it.
needs to know we've had it all screwed up till now. We'll just say we've got 2.0 code, and you're going to notice a few changes, but don't ask us what they are. You know, we would say that, but you know, it was
Nothing
like,
to see here.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is just, you know,
Yeah.
somewhere in the deep core of that coding is what caused those changes. And right?
We could talk.
And,
Yeah.
and you hope nobody knows. And
Yeah.
and so at some point, this one guy was just like, no, everybody needs to know exactly why those changes occur, so that everybody can say, okay, we get it. There's been this thing we've been doing wrong. Now we're doing it right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was just shocked because that was not the culture.
Yeah.
I think that the brilliance of that Dr. Brene Brown is that I think at this moment in time in our society, like her breakthrough piece was kind of like calling the game for everybody,
Right.
for reasonable people, I should say, and
Right.
She just stepped into that moment and kind of in a way saved us all for a while, or was maybe the first big popular culture breakthrough moment,
Truth-sayer.
you know, around how vulnerability is really the thing that you look for in people, and how if somebody has the guts to just admit something or be a little more real, then it gives everybody else permission, and then we can all take a breath and then do things a little bit differently. So I just think it's been hugely powerful just in the years that I've been in this business, you know, like before Brene Brown, after Brene Brown. Now we're all talking about it and kind of living a little more healthy or easier, maybe, or more, less defended, probably. It's not easier necessarily. I remember probably one of the best churches we went to. And we've been to a gazillion of them. I remember the first Sunday we were there, the pastor, who I would get to know pretty well in the years that we lived there. What a smirker. He had a smirk on his face, like really smirky. And I think we were doing the offering or something, and I just looked at him like, there's a guy who hasn't suffered. And that was my first thought. He hasn't suffered. And
Wow.
I just was like, I don't know. And his worship leader saying, real young, and I'm like shiny, squeaky clean. And I was like, yeah, you people aren't selling me. It was like, I don't think I can't trust you. Fortunately or unfortunately, I got to watch at least the senior pastor suffer greatly and suffer well, and learned a lot about that in the time that we were there. But that when you mentioned that, how do you? Because you can spot people, you can spot them both ways.
Yeah. But I've never questioned like how you make that judgment. But it just doesn't. It seems like you seem to have a pretty good sense on who. I'm not going to bother with this person versus who, like yesterday, last night, the Heather Lynn, she just immediately opened up. It was just like so cool.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know how. I'm still even thinking about it. I don't know how I make that judgment. I don't know if it's in something as simple as body language or I don't know what it is.
For me, that boils down to intuition.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've been wrong a few times.
Yeah,
And still
you can-
let the wrong people in or around me, but
Yeah.
I generally go off of intuition because there are some people that I just automatically, my energy is like no,
Yeah.
and I just have a guard. And then there's other people that there's just an ease about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like what Teresa was saying, because there has to be trust, even if it's with a stranger. There's a level of trust because if someone's trying to be more human, as she put, and something's not there, then you don't want to offer up the level of information they're asking.
Yeah.
And that's really uncomfortable when that
Yeah.
happens. It's like, you haven't earned that. Don't go there. Yeah.
Or sometimes I feel safe in doing it, but I don't know that they're really that interested, and so,
Yeah.
Right.
so I just, I want to, but it's like, and being a remote person with most of the non-social engagements, it's hard to
Hard
read.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I found it harder and harder over time to really have that close connection with folks in the work environment because it's just easier to be in that place of knowing and judging and how much do I share and how much do I connect versus, not. Yeah.
I heard a scary thing. This is a little bit of a tangent, and we don't have to get off of it, but too much. I hope we don't too much. But I heard a thing on NPR with a Gen Zer saying that they trust text so much more than human interactions because you can actually read what a person means by whether they use a comma or a period or an exclamation mark or a smiley face. That they trust text more than face-to-face interactions. I found that frightening.
I hate how they label things like that on a whole generation.
Well, this was,
But I think
Yeah.
that's for me personally. So much tone of like the tone is missing, and so many
Exactly.
things get misconstrued.
Exactly. There's a lack of human, but there is a generation that is raised with a higher proportion of their communication is via text and less human, eyeball to eyeball communication. And so there was a they have, at least this group, this study showed that they were trusting that black and white text more than human interaction. And I just thought, I don't want to be in that world.
I think I'm a terrible texter, so
I am
what must
too.
people think of my text?
I'm straight to the point.
Yeah, I
think
kind of
I'm
am
whole-
so terse, and I always have to remind myself to say hello, or nice to see you,
Good
or
morning, hope
how
your day's
are
going
you,
well.
or even in email, dear Susan, or whoever, instead of, that'll be 2:00 on Friday, or something.
I feel that. I'm the same.
Yeah.
I want to go back to like what you said in your chapter about changing the channel,
Yeah,
because I feel like that's so imperative when you're trying to retrain your negative thoughts and negative thinking. I know for myself, I do a flip and turn.
oh,
And like you
I like
said,
that too.
100 times a day. Like some days, it's literally 100 times a day. But anytime I get a negative thought, whether it's about myself or about somebody else, like I try to turn it right away. Even if I don't completely, wholeheartedly, fully believe it in that moment, I try to like, just to try and change those patterns, and it's helped a lot. Even like, I'll use my road rage as an example because I have it. Like someone will cut in or someone will just do something, and my first thing that comes out of my mouth is always, "You dumb fuck." And I've been changing that to,
Wait, I think I'm
blessed,
going to
loved
borrow
human
that one.
being.
Sorry.
I literally,
full
or like when
response.
you have the
Nice.
loop-de-loops that like slow everybody down and the accidents on the other side of the highway, I'm like, just drive. But then I'm like, okay, they're just sending good energy, like just don't care. Just keep going. But I do it 100 times a day for a million different things just to try and get myself out of that pattern of automatically going there, because it was just so easily done. It was so automatic to automatically go there or automatically question myself or people around me when it's not always so.
Yeah, I think I was just so functionally depressed for so long. Like, I don't want to minimize depression because I know there's lots of grades of it and lots of experience of it, but I probably was depressed for the better part of half a decade or more, where just this really dark feeling and this kind of constant regurgitation of some version of I suck, and that was after being a therapist for 20 years, understanding shame completely, working with people all the time, but it wasn't until I learned about the brain that I realized that you don't have to, like, you don't change the nature of shame. It just is what it is. And so you either are engulfed in it or give in to it or you're living in it, or, well, it just never occurred to me that it was a place I could leave. You're either a person with low self-esteem, depression, and shame-based, individual, or you've learned how to talk yourself out of it, or you've healed your way out of it, or you've, which was my big thing. We can just heal that sucker, and it was just such a new thought that whole milieu was meaning that got made in my mind, with good reason maybe. I could trace it back. I was really great at tracing it all back. Knew all the ways, all the places where, and had spent like so much time trying to heal it by tracking everything down. That's why I became a therapist, and I would help people do that. And part of it was, sitting with my colleagues in this consultation group that I have, and as we all check in, it's all, we're old now, and we've been therapists for a long, long time, and every time we're checking in with some new thing we're working on, there's some new thing we're trying to heal, some new thing and I'm like, oh dear God, please tell me we're not going to do this till we die. Like, when is it ever enough? How do we ever stop? And I started to kind of get the feeling maybe we're just addicted to suffering. Like, maybe we just don't know it. But it just became this like some kind of a view where I could step back and go, nobody else worries about this like we do. Like other people go about their lives, you know, and we've probably excavated all among us hundreds of thousands of little healable moments, and where are we? We're still talking about the same thing. You know what I mean? So it just started to become kind of absurd to me. But what's the alternative? So there was never really presented any other alternative. You have to keep working on that stuff, or what, you know? So it wasn't until I started learning about how I'm not my mind, you know, that there is I can observe what my mind's doing, and then who's doing the observing? What? You know, something that's not in it, you know, so all of that was just a life changer. And then to start anyway, so I was, but nevertheless, I was still pretty depressed just because of things. And I was trying to figure out how to help myself. I wasn't going to go to a freaking therapist, for God's sake, you know, like I tried to, and that didn't work. And so when I learned about those neural pathways and how we strengthen them by thinking the same thoughts, and they just get fatter and fatter, and they get faster and faster, and they're stronger and stronger, I just thought, well, maybe if I just don't entertain them, that's one thing I could do. And that might just, for now, it's all I know to do. Like, I'm tired of all the other things, so I can't go there. So that, just that one thought, that when I feel this way, which was so familiar that I knew what these particular thoughts were. I didn't even want to give them the time of day, but I just knew when I felt this way, that if I don't follow it all the way through the toll booth, you know, maybe I could just not reinforce it. And so that just seemed like now is such a measly little ray of hope. You know, just not reinforcing it was all I really could do. And took months and months really to kind of go, well, yeah, I felt like crap when I woke up in the morning, but this is when Kayla was a baby. She was my favorite. So I could just go over there and spend, 20 minutes with a 6-month-old baby or whatever. And then I could feel like, I could feel the energy shift. I could feel it different. And, this is what it feels like when I'm in Isuckville. This is what it feels like when I'm not there. And then continue to practice just gave me enough hope to kind of keep practicing. And then it just became more and more absurd to be there when I didn't have to be there, although I would always find myself dragged down there, because it's just such a habit. But anyway, it just, just those tiny little things sometimes can be so powerful.
You've talked about this Isuckville thing as mostly an internal self-flagellation, inner critic. What if your critic is external? Is it the same battle? Like, if somebody says, okay, boomer to you, is it the same battle to recover? That wasn't the thought you came up with.
I try to live my life so that no one criticizes
no one
me.
can do that, right? Yeah, so, but is that just a different form of Isuckville? Living that life so I never get that negative feedback.
Well,
because then it implies that who I am and how I think and how I just naturally say things before I think, that's somehow a defective thing. And maybe that's just who I really am. And maybe that's lovable too. And maybe even if I get, kind of an okay boomer response to some random thought that I put out there, maybe I shouldn't just go all down the freeway into
Oh, yeah,
Isuckville,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe I could just go, yeah, okay, that's what they think, whatever, move on, get out of Isuckville.
So, just to review, so I'm talking about an internal process with myself.
Yep.
But if you're out there and people criticize you for one thing or another, how do you deal with that criticism?
Kind of like Brene
It's-
Brown's problem when people were criticizing her.
Oh my God,
when
and she got it
first
in
started
spades.
being a big
Can you
figure.
imagine?
I don't know if you knew this, but
Gee.
they were saying mean things about her weight, her appearance, her husband, on and on. I mean, it was brutal.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, her first TED Talk,
Yeah.
I remember just being so stunned by it. It was
Yeah.
so incredible. But she's just, she's just a regular
Professor.
college professor.
Yeah.
And I think she's wearing
Brown
brown
shirt.
or she was wearing, she was wearing a jeans
The
jacket
second
maybe.
one was
or
the
the second one's a
jean
jean
jacket. The first
jacket.
one was a brown shirt.
Yeah, so anyway, and you know how vicious people can be. Holy cow. But yeah, she looked frumpy, or she's too overweight, or why don't you get your hair fixed, or, all these just horrible things. And of course, she's talking about vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so there's that two sides of the coin is the people who are hearing you will respond to you, and the people who are not can just go on the attack. That's what it means to be vulnerable, right? Unguarded. So I don't know how she feels now about those things. I can't, I can't personally imagine, because I have lived my life to try to avoid that. I can't even say what I think on Facebook, because that's another probably level of being secure in who you are, so that when people say things that are meant to, even if they're not meant to, like if they misunderstand, or if they twist things, or if they put words in your mouth or whatever, how to stay centered. Yeah.
I mean, but isn't the whole point of focusing and doing the inner work to keep yourself out of Isuckville that you have that oneness and that I am, to where you can deflect? Like, it's not that what they say doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, there's gonna be people who are supposed to hear you, and there's people that are not supposed to hear you, and that's okay. And there's people who aren't gonna like everything about you, and that's okay, because you're secure within yourself and you're okay with yourself. I mean, I had an incident this last week, and there was like a smidgen where I let myself get angry and I let myself get upset, and then after like 20 minutes I was like, no way, like that was what we'll call the last rise, and move forward, because obviously that person is still there and life has moved on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
People
I
are
agree
always
with you.
gonna misunderstand, or they're gonna have fear, or they're gonna have their own Isuckville that they're dealing and filtering through, and I don't know.
Or defending against.
Right, I
Yeah.
personally can't function in someone else's Isuckville. I have my own.
Yeah, I know. I got plenty. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the next step.
Well, and like recently I did this narcissism summit thing through Sounds True, and one of the things that narcissists do, because they're always making upward and downward social comparisons, is they try to put down the people who are below them, or that they sense competition from, in order to feel better about themselves. Like, I put this person down. So the people they do that to go to Isuckville, right? And what do you say to them? Is it the same practice? How is it
Yeah,
different?
I don't know. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Gosh,
What-
I mean, that's a great
It's
question.
it's
I
so
don't know,
steep
for
in
sure.
judgment, though, right? Because I think the whole, just like the wisdom applies to yourself, to I am. Even if there's legitimate flaws in you,
Yeah.
it's like I am, full stop. And that's also the healthiest way to be with other people,
Right?
is you are. you know. And so by the time, as soon as you're comparing, you've automatically
Yep.
blown that out of the water.
That's part of Suckville right there,
Yeah,
comparing.
and so yeah.
I'm just reminded of a sentence from Codependency Recovery, Codependence Anonymous, where there's nothing more disturbing than being around healthy people. You know, that's there's the power, I guess, whether it's recognized or not, depending on who you're around, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. But the power of living authentically or vulnerably, whatever the expression would be, is that people that aren't are either going to do the narcissistic thing and find some way to attack you, or they get to look at their own Isuckville and decide, do I want to keep doing that or not? You know, that's I don't know. That's at least where my mind goes, is what keeps me, one, for my own mental sanity and being able to live with myself, but what keeps me doing it, because I think there's an invitation to other people as well, whether they're going to accept it or not.
But
Do you know what I mean by invitation?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that Marianne Williams thing that she writes. Like,
Let your light.
as you let your own light shine, you liberate others to do the same.
I would say, if you want other people, if you're even in a place where you want other people to like you or approve you, you are asking them to make a judgment of you.
Right.
And judgment is exactly the wrong place
Right.
to be, period. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
why it has to be
Yeah.
a no strings attached invitation. That can't be
That's
part
right.
of it. You
Yeah.
can't be entangled with that, or you just
Yeah,
lost.
it's like, I'm going to be myself, and what beauty comes to me, what doesn't. And it's like, if you can accept that, you're in a really healthy place, you know. And it's not to say you don't recognize that people aren't appreciating you or whatever. You recognize it, you just don't have to hold on to it
Right.
and use it as a judgment against yourself. It's like, I don't know why they don't like me. I don't know why. I look at myself in the mirror and I wake up every morning and I'm okay with myself. Sure wish a lot more people liked me. They don't.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Oh darn.
yeah, oh darn. That's really it. And that's the same way I would try to look out, you know, at other people. It's not like I don't make my I'm going to use the word judgment. It's not like I don't make my judgment of what a person's strengths or weaknesses seem to be, but it's not really a judgment. It's an observation. Yes, I make those observations, but the people I choose to be around are such that they don't ever transition to judgments. Now, if someone's a real jerk, then I'll just stay out of that circle, because I can't manage that boundary. I'm starting to judge them, and then it's negative on me.
Right.
You know.
I think it matters too, and I think the component I'm now thinking maybe gets added when it's feedback from others that you're stuck in, is there something there that I need to address? Do they have a point?
Right, yeah. That's healthy.
And maybe instead of going to the shame thoughts, just think about, okay, was this valuable feedback that could be useful to me in some way for making a change in my life? Maybe there is a change I need to make.
Yeah.
And maybe I could show up differently for, you know, especially people like that person who are going to be offended if I say that thing or whatever. So I might be open to change. I think Brene Brown would say the thing I have to not do is go to shame. And so you can have something like the inner critic conversation, but if it's free from shaming,
That's
and
right.
if it's a compassionate inner dialogue,
Yeah.
that changes it. And I think it's harder to do when you get this mirror out there that says you're defective or that
Yeah.
you know you're bad in some way.
Yeah, and I just had that exact experience. You know, I was sitting down at a table with Mary's daughter, you know, and then she let me know at some point that, oh yeah, you know, a few weeks ago, you know, you were with me, yeah, and you felt like Yeah, you were, was it mansplaining? Is that what it was?
Probably.
Yeah, well, anyway, the point was she just felt like I wasn't being very sensitive, to other people. I was kind of being the white, I always forget, the privileged, person or whatever. And it didn't, I was like very thankful to hear it, but it still hurt.
Mhm.
So it didn't hurt in a self-judgmental way. So hurt's not even the right word. I was disappointed. I was actually just grateful to hear it. I mean, frankly, I don't think I was hurt or disappointed. I was like, oh, dang.
Like an unawareness.
Yeah.
Coming
So
in.
actually, there was a gratefulness. There was a certain level of
You always get a little stun
discomfort.
factor right
Yeah, there
before
was-
the
yeah,
there
gratitude.
was,
Yeah.
so there was
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
there, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. It didn't transition into judgment
It wasn't
of
the
myself.
only thing there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
didn't use it as a judge for myself. I just kind of recognized, you're right, this thing. Yeah, I'm like, okay, it's there,
Learning.
but it didn't corrupt the learning opportunity. I was like, oh, that's good to know. I'm glad I know that now.
Yeah.
How many times in life have people not shared with me things that could improve me that I honestly
Right.
agree with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's a thought too, is to say, well, maybe how is this a gift to me? This
Yeah.
feedback I just got.
Instead of going
Instead of going to
immediately
shame.
defensiveness. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
explaining,
Yeah.
well, what I meant was.
Yeah.
I'm remembering this moment when I still needed a supervisor to get my license when I started my practice again here. And I went to him, and I was really stuck in this perfectionism business. Like, I think if I didn't, if there was a flaw that came to my attention, it just mortified me. And I was in the middle of talking to him about something like that. And I can't remember what it was. And I just was horrified that I might have been something or other. And he just goes, well, I guess you'll just have to come down here with the rest of us then. And then that shocked me, because it was, that's a very deft, we call it paradoxical intention.
Yeah.
But that
It
was
was
a
well done.
really,
Yeah.
really deft intervention.
Your
Um,
perfectionism failed because I just caught you being too perfectionist.
Well, it was this thing about narcissism, really. It was he just kind of said, you trying to be perfect and you being so frickin' shocked that you're not perfect. Like, oh my God, cry me a river. You've not shown yourself to be the most superior of all time. I guess you'll have to come off your pedestal and be down here with the rest of us schmucks, basically, was what he was saying. And it really did hit me with that force, like, how stupid is that? And how ridiculous was that? And it just really shocked me in a way that did me good.
I was going to say it's a great gift, actually.
Oh yeah,
it was a
yeah.
great gift.
Because actually, in my insecurity and perfectionism, I had put him on the pedestal,
Exactly.
and my shame was like, "Oh, I can't believe you have to see this in me." And he was like, "Well, I guess you have to come down here with us now," which was a great gift. And so, yeah, perfectionism is just a.
And there's a way to receive something that doesn't send you into the shame cycle, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
and
If you can,
if
yeah.
you can, yes. At some point in time, perhaps, if your own inner work allows you to be more I am, I would imagine that you could perhaps be less sensitive to those dialogues from the outer world and recognize them more as a observation learning opportunity, as opposed to here's your ticket to get onto the Isuckville
Right.
road again that you've been trying to stay off of.
Yeah. Theoretically.
Theoretically.
I'm just feeling how hard that
It
whole
is,
conversation is, personally for me. I mean, I'm the one I'm writing this book about vulnerability, and I'm only talking to some really supportive people about it, and I'm imagining really in my head every day how people are going to misunderstand it, or if people who don't know me and see me, how they're going to criticize
Judge it,
my
yeah.
looks or my voice or my attitude or my oldness or my whiteness or my,
Boomerness.
my preciousness or my whatever. Somebody's a little sensitive to the whole.
Yeah, it's okay. Boomer thing's not
coming
okay
forward.
with me.
It's hurtful.
Yeah.
Well, but the
It's
whole
meant
but
to
the
be.
whole thing is, even if it's hurtful, it's all based on judgment, which is already something I don't particularly respect.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's like easier said than done.
Yeah.
But it's again like, who gives a shit if people do that? I mean, it's not, we don't want it, but I don't own that. I don't own the people that are judgmental.
Yeah, I wonder too. I'm really struggling in this conversation in my head because I'm really wondering about the whole idea of vulnerability. If you're living softer and you are taking steps to reveal some things about yourself that are not fully acceptable or whatever. Does that leave you, in a sense, more? It does leave you more open to those things coming toward you, and that they could really hurt.
Yeah.
But that is different than going to shame, like going, "Oh, I guess I am a stupid idiot," or And part of what I think that I struggle with is I see the other person's point of view. Like as soon as they say, "Well, she's whatever," it's like, "Oh, I get it." Like I get how they're seeing me that way. And the pull to that judgment is really strong, and I guess that just reflects how new I am at this.
I don't know. I make Aspen stand in front of the mirror every day and say positive affirmations. So
Yeah.
literally, like, I am brave, which you're brave for putting it out there. But on another note, I just feel that the people that are meant to receive what you're saying will receive it. And anybody else who's not meant, either they're not ready or they're not there yet. So it's just simple as that. I feel like we do a lot of thinking, and I'm an overthinker too, and that's where you get caught up in Isuckville, is letting those thoughts spin when it can be simplified.
Yeah.
Because the people that are meant to get it and receive it will.
I'm also thinking about that thing that you said about people who are whole in of themselves can sometimes be intimidating to other people, or how did you put
Yeah,
it?
just healthy people are very disturbing to people that are still
Playing the game.
playing the games
Yeah.
and the lies and the hide and seek and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
At what point, like, because I feel like when we're focusing on our own triggers, we have to let go of other people's triggers because we have our own to focus on in that sense. Because I trigger people all the time, and it's not intentional, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I do and I don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, there comes a point where you have to not necessarily detach, but be within yourself, like, because if we carried every single person's trigger around with us, like,
You can't
that'd be
do
a
anything.
heavy
Yeah,
load.
yeah.
And you would be
Yeah.
like literally stuck in the mud, like cemented to the ground, not
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and to feel that it can be shocking sometimes. Like, and I don't know if it's because I'm healthier, or I was healthier or not, but I'm just remembering a couple of situations. One was I was running to the pharmacy one day. I had like an hour break, and I needed to pick up a prescription, so I went to the pharmacy. I think this was when we were in Highlands Ranch, where you go to Kaiser and you stand in line. Anyway, so it's like I have this amount of time to go pick up my prescription, and I can probably make it. But I went in there, and the line was long, and I was standing there, and I was just wondering, are we gonna? I'm kind of agitated, and standing there, kind of looking around, or looking at my watch, or sighing, or whatever I was doing, clearly kind of agitated. And I started noticing the people around me were like, stepping back.
Ah.
Kind of like,
Oh my.
Distancing
You were-
themselves.
you were
she's gonna
spewing
blow
out
or
some kind
something.
of
Yeah.
That's
And so,
amazing.
but I wasn't being particularly healthy, but I think I was being unguarded.
Yeah.
And I wasn't used to, I wasn't doing my normal thing, which is just blend in and be invisible.
Yeah.
And I'm not invisible. Like, I'm a large person, and I was feeling what I was feeling. And then it just was the strangest thing to notice people just keeping an eye
Didn't
on
somebody
me.
actually
Like,
offer to let you go ahead of them?
Oh, I don't
It
remember.
seemed
They
like I
might have.
remember
Oh my
that.
gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I may have, but
Wow.
yeah.
And what's just dawning on me was one of the other powerful things about the chapter, and I don't know why it's taken me this long to kind of recognize it, but one of the other important things I think to get across to healthy people is that staying healthy is an effort. Even if you get there to the level you get to, whatever level you get to, you're still going to keep getting knocked off, and you got to exercise the muscle to get back on, because you have a bad day or something hits a trigger you haven't dealt with before, and then what you're trying to achieve is the ability to recognize it quicker and to have the tools to go, oh, just let it go, and to be able to just take a breath and let it go. And yeah, because I'm not sure what made me think of that specifically, but there's just a recognition that well, I guess it's just experience. It's like sometimes you just let yourself down and you go, wow, I really was better than that, but I really did fall off my horse there.
It doesn't take very
I really
long
did
either.
fall off my horse.
Yeah.
But I think that's you have to not judge yourself for that too.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's just like recognize it and like,
Embrace
ooh, I
the
didn't live up to my
humanness.
own
What
abilities.
happened there?
Yeah, let's get back up. And if you need to then exercise an apology, then you apologize, and then that kind of cleanses you, and you move right back, move along. But it's an effort. It's an effort.
Yeah, I keep thinking about recognizing shame and how paralyzing it is in other people, and recognizing my own familiarity with it, but that I'm not where I used to be, but not knowing how to liberate somebody else that's still really stuck with it. That's really hard for me, because but it's so heartbreaking to watch somebody paralyzed and
Yeah.
just like completely in the shame toilet,
Mhm.
and can't move,
Yeah.
and then and knowing I've been there and not, I can't build the steps of the ladder to how when I start to go there, even if I go there, I don't stay as long as I used to. Some strength or resilience has been built in my life, and I don't know whether it's because I'm decades older, or if what are the practices that have become powerful to get me from there to, like, okay, I can keep moving. But anyway, that one's tricky, and it explaining about the neural pathways and saying the affirmations as an outsider isn't very powerful. It's not, it's not a life raft or, a lifeline that they can grab and pull
onto
out
and
very
you go,
easily.
yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
something else that has to happen to shorten that duration in Isuckville that is completely independent. It's an inside job, but anyway.
Yeah, that's the really frightening part, I think.
And I wonder if it's empathy and compassion for that person at that moment in time. If that's what happens internally when shame shows up, is to offer ourselves empathy and compassion. It seems like probably the only thing that we can do for someone else who's in that place is offer them empathy and compassion as a witness and an observer. And
Yeah.
Like hold
Good.
the space, don't
Yeah.
like, I don't know, for me, because I've always played what I call Captain Save-A-Ho. But literally, I'm always the fixer.
Wait, stop, wait.
Never heard that one before.
Did she use that?
But really, like, I'm always trying to fix and help and do, and it is an inside job. And so when I'm with people, like, because too, I absorb.
Right.
Because I'm an empath,
Right.
and so I've had to learn to navigate that and to observe and not absorb. And you can hold space without having to fix them, but it's the awareness that I can't fix that.
Right.
They have to do that. Because for a lot of time in my life, especially with like my parents, I would get stuck in Isuckville trying to fix and not doing enough because I couldn't fix them or I couldn't fix their things. I don't know.
Well, I think it's true that shame is a relational wound originally, and I was thinking about so why I get so touchy about the Brene Brown thing is that one of the very first papers I ever wrote in grad school was on shame, and I had to kind of read this really thick book on shame, and now I'm just remembering now that Gershon Kaufman is his name. He says that it's a relational bridge. So shame separates you from those
From the
who
eyes.
can carry you. Yeah.
Keep
Care
going,
for
I'm
you.
sorry.
Yeah. And so recovering from shame is you have to restore the relational bridge.
Yeah.
And so you can only do that really by reaching towards someone in there with compassion or grace or just even understanding or even, I don't know, anything. And so sometimes that needs to come from the outside, and sometimes you just can't do it for yourself because you're so stuck in Isuckville that why would anyone,
That just kickstarted some of my juices. Like, that is such a horrible mixed metaphor. Kickstarting juices, but it's so, shame is so isolating, and to offer a lifeline is to be seen in your failure and not pile on without
Right.
the judgment, to be seen and still loved and valued
Yes.
Right.
in the failure is that
Wow.
bridge
Yeah.
that allows them to climb out of the hole or to see the light or part the curtain or whatever it is. But it's still such an inside job, but you can offer that lifeline by just being a witness, being present, giving that space, like you said. But God, it's just still such a freaking uphill climb and decades of work but
Yeah, and trying to offer that without getting stuck in their story.
exactly.
Like as you're listening well and empathizing, you get so wrapped up in their story that
Yep.
you have absolutely nothing to help them get out of Isuckville.
Yeah, and playing the persuasion game is just so fruitless.
Yeah,
Right.
Like,
tried that for a long time.
let me tell you how
Let me help you
Ask
fix
how
this. This is
wonderful-
what you should do.
how wonderful you are
Yeah.
when they're not they have to
They
say
can't
that
see
to
that.
themselves.
Yeah.
Hearing me say you're wonderful, you're loved, you're adequate, you're all the things is like, yeah, I could say that till I'm blue in the face. Until they say it internally is
Although sometimes you need to hear that from somebody else because you never hear
Yeah.
it. And so to kind of go, well, if Mary thinks that, then maybe I'm
What if she's
this,
right?
yeah,
What if
this
she's-
moment, yeah,
But
maybe
the
I'm
what
not
if
wrong.
is on
Maybe
their
I'm not.
part. They
Yes.
have to
Right.
initiate the what if.
Right.
What if she's right? What if there is? What if I can be okay? Being messy without the judgment.
Because I think it is still worth saying those things and doing those things.
Okay, I'll keep doing it.
You must keep doing it.
I got permission
Back
slip.
to, like, all of the people through my life who, when I was really in an Isuckville space, who were still guiding lights, whether I heard it then or I understood what they were saying 10 years later. Like, it's still a light.
I just want to say this other thing. Going back to the very first thing about people who, like something about how when you've settled the issue inside yourself, and how you search for other people who you can recognize as being vulnerable or being real or something. I will never forget my encounter with Richard Foster. I've told you guys this story before, but if he's, I don't know where he is now, if he's retired, if he's still out there doing things, but he was a writer, Christian writer, and like a big influence on the evangelical community with contemplative practice and ancient contemplative practice. Anyway, he got to meet him. He came to our church once and then had some interaction with him later, but being just around him. So he was like a superstar as far as I was concerned, even though I hadn't heard of him before we met him. But in certain circles, like, he was a big freaking deal and probably has written, I don't know how many books, 10 books or something.
Yeah.
And, but just being in his presence is like wearing a pair of jeans, you just so easy, not even an awe kind of like some people carry an authority where you're just like want to be in the sunshine of their love, and he was really gracious like that, but he had the kind of presence that that both my 15-year-old daughter and any random kid in the room, he would just sit and chat with them. So he did come to our church one time when I was preaching, which I have to tell you was quite intimidating. But him sitting there listening to me was like, okay, I can relax. Like, just the look on his face, just his nothing special presence. Like, okay, I can find my words again. I can think. But then afterwards, I think he must have spent 15 or 20 minutes talking to Gloria, who at the time was 15, and about her life or school and her boyfriends or whatever. And there wasn't a line of people waiting to talk. Nobody knew who he was, actually, because it was sort of, how it all worked out. They had called and said, we'll be there tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't sleep now. But they both came in and they were just another couple of visitors and no one, so that to me was like my new standard of, I don't know, kind of a wholeness or a humility or a kind of somebody who just was so okay with who they were that doesn't matter who they talk to, who's waiting to talk to them, or whether they're known or not known, and I just such a shining example for me.
And how impactful that experience, experiencing that.
Yeah.
It's not just something that in theory, it's not something that you can see in yourself. You've experienced something from someone, and that experience
It's a
changed
marker.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've got to say, that's the type of feeling I get from Kathy and Jose.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, they're a big deal. They
Yeah.
do a lot of freaking amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And they're completely normal. There is
Yeah.
no airs about. Yeah. So I find them remarkable mentors in that regard. Yeah.
And I think too, so to sum up, in some ways, I wonder if that's like one of the real markers of soulful living is that
Ease.
is a sense of ease, yeah. And and not having to, not concerned about your brand all the time.
Mhm.
You know,
Because you're not judging yourself.
You're not-
I think that's it.
yeah,
It's
you're
just
just
like I'm just doing the
being-
best I can, same as you. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. You know, I think it's not judging. It allows you to be easy because there's nothing to prove.
yeah, it's such freedom. Like
Yeah.
once you're
There's
like,
nothing-
oh
when you're
wait, I
really
don't
there,
have to
there's nothing to
decide.
prove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to
Yeah.
be perfect. I don't have to
Yeah.
be a schmuck. I don't even have to
Yeah.
decide.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even have to evaluate, and then that just leaves so much space for all the rest or nothing.
Yep.
It's completely authentic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.
Yeah, Richard Foster wrote